Michelle Carter stepped out of her sleek black sedan and took a deep breath. The sun was shining brightly, casting long shadows across the parking lot of one of her most prestigious dealerships. She had chosen this location for her unannounced visit because it was one of the newest branches of Carter Motors, her brainchild. Michelle had worked tirelessly to build her company from scratch, transforming it into a luxury car dealership chain that people admired. Today, however, she wasn't dressed in her usual sharp business attire. Instead, she wore a simple pair of jeans, sneakers, and a plain blue hoodie. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and she carried nothing but a small handbag. This casual look was intentional. Michelle wanted to see how her employees treated ordinary customers, people who didn't walk in wearing expensive suits or flashing designer accessories. Over the years, she had heard whispers about certain locations not living up to the company's values. Some customers complained about feeling ignored or judged based on their appearance. Michelle hoped these were isolated incidents, but she needed to know for sure. And so, she decided to go undercover. As she approached the glass doors of the showroom, Michelle felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. This wasn't the first time she'd done something like this, but every visit still gave her butterflies. Pushing open the door, she stepped inside and was immediately greeted by the cool air conditioning and the faint scent of leather polish. The showroom sparkled under bright lights, with rows of gleaming cars lined up neatly. Each vehicle seemed to beckon potential buyers with its polished finish and luxurious design. Despite the impressive display, Michelle noticed something odd right away. The room was eerily quiet. There were no bustling employees greeting visitors or offering assistance. A few customers wandered around aimlessly, looking at cars without anyone approaching them. Michelle frowned slightly. This wasn't what she expected. At Carter Motors, customer service was supposed to be top-notch. Every visitor should feel welcomed and valued, regardless of whether they planned to buy a car that day or just browse. Deciding to test things herself, Michelle walked over to the front desk. Behind it sat a young man named Jake, who appeared to be scrolling through his phone. His name tag read Jake in bold letters, though he didn't seem particularly interested in helping anyone. Michelle cleared her throat softly, hoping to catch his attention. When he finally looked up, his expression remained indifferent. "Hi," Michelle said with a warm smile. "I'm interested in learning more about your vehicles." Jake glanced at her outfit briefly before replying, "Sure, let me get someone to help you." He turned away without another word, picking up his phone again as if she were already forgotten. Michelle waited patiently, leaning against the counter. Minutes ticked by, but no one came to assist her. She began to feel a growing sense of unease. Was this really how her company treated its customers? Just as she was about to ask, Jake, again a tall man with slicked back hair and an air of authority, strode toward her. This was Kevin, the manager of the dealership. From his confident posture and tailored suit, it was clear he considered himself important. "Can I help you?" Kevin asked, his tone clipped and dismissive. His eyes flicked over Michelle's casual attire, lingering on her sneakers and hoodie. It was obvious what he thought of her. "Yes, thank you," Michelle replied calmly, ignoring his rudeness. "I'm looking for a new car and I wanted to see what options you have here." Kevin crossed his arms over his chest and raised an eyebrow. "These are high-end vehicles," he said pointedly. "Are you sure this is the right place for you?" Michelle blinked, taken aback by his blatant disrespect. She hadn't expected such hostility, especially not in her own dealership. Still, she kept her composure. "I understand that," she said evenly, "but I'd like to take a closer look at some of the models." Kevin sighed dramatically, as if dealing with her was a waste of his time. "Look, we cater to a specific clientele here," he explained condescendingly. "People who can actually afford these cars. Maybe you'd be better off at one of those used car lots down the road." The words stung, but Michelle refused to let him see her anger. Instead, she nodded politely. "Thank you for your honesty," she said, "but I think I'll stick around for a bit longer." Kevin rolled his eyes and gestured to Jake, who had been watching the exchange silently. "Escort her out," he ordered sharply. "We don't need distractions here." Jake hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but when Kevin shot him a glare, he reluctantly moved forward. "Ma'am," he muttered, gesturing toward the door. "I'm sorry, but—" Before Jake could finish, Michelle held up a hand to stop him. Then slowly, she reached into her bag and pulled out her ID badge. It was emblazoned with the Carter Motors logo, and clearly identified her as the CEO of the company. The room fell, silent as everyone turned to look at her. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding," Michelle said, her voice steady but laced with authority. "My name is Michelle Carter and I own this dealership." Kevin's face went pale. For a moment he stood frozen, unable to speak. Finally he managed to stutter. "Ms. Carter, I didn't realize, it's just—" "You didn't realize? I might dress casually sometimes?" Michelle interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "Or did you assume that someone like me couldn't possibly belong here?" Kevin opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The other employees watched, nervously, unsure of what would happen next. Michelle took a step closer to Kevin, her gaze unwavering. "As of this moment, you're fired," she declared firmly. "And I want you out of this building immediately." The announcement sent shockwaves through the room. No one dared to move, as Michelle signaled for security to escort Kevin out. As he left, trailing behind two burly guards, the tension in the air was palpable. Once the doors closed behind him, Michelle turned to face the remaining staff. "This is unacceptable," she said, addressing the group. "Carter Motors was built on principles of inclusivity and respect. What happened today goes against everything we stand for. I'll be conducting a thorough review of this location to ensure this never happens again." With that, Michelle turned on her heel and walked out of the showroom. As she climbed back into her car, she couldn't shake the frustration simmering inside her. This wasn't just about Kevin's behavior. It was about a culture that allowed such attitudes to thrive. Michelle knew she had work to do, and she was determined to fix it. After leaving the dealership, Michelle Carter drove in silence, her mind racing with thoughts about what had just happened. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, replaying Kevin's dismissive attitude and the cold indifference of the staff. It wasn't just anger that churned inside her. It was disappointment. Disappointment in herself for not catching this sooner. Disappointment in Kevin for his blatant prejudice. And disappointment in the system she had built that somehow allowed such behavior to go unchecked. When she arrived home, Michelle parked her car in the driveway and sat there for a few minutes, staring at the house without really seeing it. The weight of the day pressed down on her shoulders. Finally, she stepped out of the car and walked inside. Her assistant, Lisa, was waiting for her in the living room. Lisa had been with Michelle since the early days of Carter Motors, and she knew when something was wrong. "Hey," Lisa said softly, setting aside the tablet she'd been working on. "How did it go?" Michelle sighed deeply and sank into the couch opposite Lisa. "It was eye-opening," she admitted. "I went to the new dealership today, incognito like we talked about." Lisa nodded, encouraging her to continue. "And first I thought maybe I was overreacting," Michelle said, shaking her head. "But then Kevin, the manager, he outright dismissed me. He told me this place wasn't for people like me." "Can you believe that?" Lisa's eyes widened, in shock. "What? That's insane. You own the company." "I know," Michelle replied bitterly. "And the worst part is, I don't think he even realized how bad it sounded until I showed him my ID. By then, it was too late." Lisa leaned forward, her expression serious. "Did you fire him?" Michelle nodded. "Right on the spot. I couldn't let something like that slide. Not in my own dealership, but firing Kevin isn't enough. There's clearly a bigger problem here." Lisa frowned. "What do you mean?" Michelle hesitated before answering. "While I was there, I overheard two employees talking about how Kevin had been instructing them to prioritize certain customers over others based on how they looked. They said he made it clear that only wealthy-looking clients deserved their attention. It's discrimination, plain and simple." Lisa looked horrified. "That's terrible. Do you think it's happening at other locations too?" "I don't know," Michelle admitted, "but I can't take any chances. If this kind, A thing is happening under my nose. I need to fix it, and fast." The two women sat in silence for a moment, both lost in thought. Then Lisa spoke up. "So what are you going to do?" Michelle took a deep breath. "First, I'm going to review all the customer feedback from that location. Maybe there's more evidence of what's been going on. Second, I'll call an emergency meeting with the senior executives tomorrow morning. We're going to figure out how to address this issue across the board." Lisa nodded approvingly. "Good plan. Let me pull together the reports and anything else you might need." "Thanks, Lisa," Michelle said, managing a small smile. "I don't know what I'd do without you." The next morning, Michelle woke up early, feeling restless. She spent an hour pacing around her kitchen, sipping coffee while thinking about the meeting ahead. When Lisa arrived with a stack of documents, Michelle felt slightly more prepared, but not much. Together, they went through the reports Lisa had gathered. One document caught Michelle's attention immediately. It was a summary of customer complaints filed against Kevin's management style over the past 6 months. There were several allegations of favoritism, rude treatment, and even outright refusal to assist certain individuals. Some customers described being ignored or mocked by staff members who seemed to follow Kevin's lead. "This is worse than I thought," Michelle muttered, flipping through the pages. "These aren't isolated incidents. This has been going on for months." Lisa nodded grimly. "Do you want me to reach out to those customers, see if they're willing to share more details?" "Yes, please," Michelle said firmly. "We need to understand exactly what happened so we can prevent it from happening again." As they worked, Michelle couldn't shake the image of Kevin's face when she revealed her identity. The shock, the panic, it was almost satisfying, but it didn't make her feel better. Firing one person wouldn't solve the larger issue. She needed to dig deeper and find out why this kind of behavior had taken root in the first place. By mid-morning, Michelle was ready for the executive meeting. She gathered everyone in the conference room at the headquarters, a sleek space filled with modern furniture and large windows overlooking the city. As the team settled into their seats, Michelle stood at the head of the table, her expression serious. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began. "I called this meeting because something very troubling came to light yesterday." The room fell silent as Michelle recounted her experience at the dealership. She didn't hold back, describing every detail, from the way Jake ignored her at the front desk to Kevin's condescending remarks. When she finished, the executives exchanged uneasy glances. "I fired Kevin immediately," Michelle continued, "but that's not enough. What happened there is a symptom of a much bigger problem. Discrimination has no place in our company, and yet it exists. I've seen the proof myself." One of the executives, a man named Greg, raised his hand cautiously. "Do you think this is happening at other locations?" he asked. "I don't know," Michelle admitted, "but I'm not taking any chances. Starting today, we're launching an investigation into every branch of Carter Motors. I want to know if similar issues exist elsewhere." Another executive, Sarah, chimed in. "What about training? Shouldn't we implement stricter guidelines for customer service?" "Yes," Michelle agreed. "That's exactly what we're going to do. I'm putting Alex in charge of developing a comprehensive diversity training program for all employees, no exceptions." Alex, a trusted regional manager sitting at the far end of the table, nodded. "I'll get started right away," he promised. Michelle turned her attention back to the group. "This isn't just about fixing one dealership. It's about making sure this never happens again, at any location. From now on, every single employee will be held accountable for their actions. Anyone caught engaging in discriminatory behavior will face immediate consequences." The executives murmured their agreement, though some still looked uneasy. Michelle could tell they were worried about the potential fallout, but she didn't care. This was too important. After the meeting ended, Michelle stayed behind in the conference room, staring out the window. The city stretched out before her, bustling with life. She thought about all the people who walked into her dealerships every day, people of different races, genders, ages, and backgrounds. They deserved to be treated with respect, regardless of how much money they had in their bank accounts. Over the next few days, Michelle threw herself into the investigation. She visited several dealerships unannounced, observing how employees interacted with customers. At most locations, things seemed fine. Staff members greeted visitors warmly and offered assistance promptly. But there were a few places where Michelle noticed subtle signs of bias. Employees would linger near wealthier-looking clients while ignoring others. In one instance, a young woman wearing casual clothes was brushed off by a salesperson who assumed she wasn't interested in buying anything. Each discovery fueled Michelle's determination to create lasting change. She worked closely with Alex to design a training program that emphasized inclusivity and respect. The curriculum included role-playing exercises, videos featuring real customer testimonials, and discussions about unconscious bias. Every employee, from the managers to the janitorial staff, would be required to complete the program within the next 3 months. Meanwhile, Lisa reached out to the customers who had filed complaints against Kevin. To Michelle's relief, many of them were eager to share their stories. One woman recounted how she had been laughed at by a salesperson when she asked about financing options. Another described being ignored for nearly an hour, while staff members fawned over a man in an expensive suit. These accounts confirmed what Michelle already suspected. The problem ran deeper than just one manager. As the weeks passed, Michelle began to see signs of progress. Employees responded positively to the training sessions, and customer feedback improved significantly. Still, Michelle knew this was only the beginning. Changing a culture took time, and she was prepared to stay vigilant. Late one evening, as Michelle reviewed the latest batch of customer surveys, she allowed herself a small smile. The road ahead would be challenging, but she felt hopeful. For the first time in a long while, she believed that Carter Motors could truly live up to its values, and that made all the effort worthwhile. Kevin sat in his car, parked outside a small diner on the outskirts of town. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. He stared blankly at the neon sign flickering above the restaurant, its red and yellow lights casting an uneven glow across the cracked pavement. It had been 2 weeks since Michelle Carter fired him, and he still couldn't believe it had happened. One moment, he was running one of the most prestigious dealerships in the city. The next, he was being escorted out like a common criminal. The days following his dismissal were a blur. Kevin spent hours scrolling through job listings online, sending out resumes to every dealership and car rental company he could find. But no matter how polished his applications looked, no one called him back. Word traveled fast in the industry, and soon enough potential employers started recognizing his name, or rather the reputation that came with it. The firing hadn't just cost him his job, it had shattered his career. Desperate for work, Kevin finally swallowed his pride and accepted a position at a tiny repair shop owned by Daniel Harper. Daniel was a middle-aged man with graying hair and calloused hands, the kind of guy who always wore grease-stained coveralls and smelled faintly of motor oil. His shop wasn't glamorous, just a cramped garage with 2 bays and a waiting area cluttered with old magazines. But it paid the bills. For Kevin, that was all that mattered. On his first day, Daniel greeted him warmly, handing him a set of coveralls and showing him around the space. "Don't worry about messing up," Daniel said with a reassuring smile. "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is learning from them." Kevin nodded absently, though he didn't fully understand what Daniel meant. He'd never worked as a mechanic before, and the idea of fixing cars instead of selling them felt foreign and humiliating. Still, he kept his head down and did as he was told, determined to prove himself. Meanwhile, Michelle Carter continued her mission to transform Carter Motors. She spent countless hours traveling between locations, meeting with employees and customers alike. Her goal was simple: to ensure that every person who walked into a dealership felt valued and respected. But she quickly realized that changing a culture wasn't easy. Even with new training programs in place, some staff members struggled to break old habits. At one dealership, Michelle overheard a salesperson making a snide comment about a customer's appearance. She intervened immediately, pulling the employee aside for a private conversation. "What you said wasn't okay," Michelle explained firmly. "We don't judge people based on how they look. That's not who we are." The employee apologized. profusely, but Michelle could tell he didn't fully grasp the seriousness of his actions. It frustrated her, but she reminded herself that change took time. Not everyone would get it right away, and that was okay, as long as they were willing to learn. To reinforce her message, Michelle began holding regular town hall meetings at each location. These gatherings gave employees a chance to voice their concerns, ask questions, and share ideas. At first, many were hesitant to speak up, afraid of saying the wrong thing. But as Michelle listened patiently and responded thoughtfully, they gradually opened up. One evening, during a meeting at a suburban dealership, a young receptionist named Emily raised her hand timidly. "I just want to say thank you," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Before, I felt like I didn't belong here because I'm not, well, rich or anything. But now it feels different, like maybe I do belong." Michelle smiled warmly. "You absolutely belong here, Emily," she said. "And if anyone ever makes you feel otherwise, I want you to tell me. No one should have to deal with that, not in this company." Emily nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. Moments like these made Michelle feel hopeful. They reminded her why she had started Carter Motors in the first place, to create a place where everyone felt welcome, regardless of their background. Back at the repair shop, Kevin found himself reflecting on his past behavior more often than he cared to admit. Working alongside Daniel forced him to confront aspects of himself he'd rather ignore. Daniel had a way of seeing through people, of understanding their struggles without judgment. He treated everyone who came into the shop, whether they drove a luxury sedan or a beat-up truck, with the same kindness and respect. One afternoon, a woman pulled into the garage driving an older model sedan. Its paint was chipped and one of the headlights was cracked. As she stepped out of the car, Kevin noticed her worn-out sneakers and faded jeans. Without thinking, he muttered under his breath, "Another charity case." Daniel heard him and shot him a sharp look. "Excuse me?" he asked, his tone stern. Kevin froze, realizing what he'd said. "Nothing," he mumbled, looking away. "No, not nothing," Daniel replied. "What did you just call her?" Kevin hesitated, then sighed. I said charity case, but I didn't mean it like that. You just assumed she couldn't afford our services," Daniel finished for him. "That's exactly what I mean when I talk about treating people with respect. You don't know her story. Maybe her husband lost his job. Maybe she's saving money to send her kid to college, or maybe she just likes fixing things herself until they absolutely need professional help. Whatever the reason, it's not your place to judge." Kevin felt a pang of guilt. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but he knew Daniel was right. Slowly, he nodded. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "I'm sorry." Daniel softened slightly. "Apology accepted," he said. "But remember this. Every person who walks through that door deserves the same care and attention." "Got it?" "Got it," Kevin replied. Over the next few weeks, Kevin tried to apply Daniel's lessons to his daily interactions. He forced himself to greet every customer with a smile, even if they drove cars that weren't worth much. He listened carefully to their concerns and offered solutions without judgment. To his surprise, he started enjoying the work. There was something satisfying about rolling up his sleeves and solving problems, about seeing the relief on someone's face when their car ran smoothly again. As October rolled around, Michelle decided to host a company-wide event to celebrate the progress Carter Motors had made. The gathering took place at the flagship dealership, transformed for the occasion with string lights, food trucks, and live music. Employees from all locations attended, mingling and sharing stories. During her speech, Michelle stood on a small stage, addressing the crowd. "When I founded this company, I dreamed of creating a place where everyone felt welcome," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But dreams aren't enough. We have to fight for them every single day, and that's what we've been doing." The audience erupted into applause, and Michelle paused, taking it all in. She spotted Lisa standing near the front, beaming proudly. Across the room, Alex gave her a thumbs up. Even Emily, the receptionist who had spoken up during the town hall, meeting, waved enthusiastically. For the first time in months, Michelle allowed herself to relax. The journey wasn't over, not by a long shot, but she could see the seeds of change taking root, and that gave her hope. Later that night, as the Ubaite party wound down, Michelle stood outside the dealership watching families leave together. A father carried his sleepy child to their car while a couple laughed and held hands. In that moment, Michelle felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what Carter Motors was supposed to be, a place where people came together, united by shared dreams and aspirations. She glanced at her watch and realized it was getting late. With a final look at the glowing showroom, Michelle climbed into her car and drove home. The road ahead would still have challenges, but she was ready to face them, one step at a time. Kevin's life had changed in ways he never expected. Every morning he woke up early, threw on his coveralls, and drove to Daniel's repair shop. The work was hard, grease under his nails, sore muscles from bending over engines all day, but it gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. At first, Kevin struggled with the physical labor and the technical knowledge required to fix cars. But Daniel was patient, teaching him step by step how to diagnose problems and make repairs. One chilly November morning, as Kevin tightened a bolt on an old pickup truck, Daniel walked over with 2 cups of coffee. "Here," he said, handing one to Kevin. "You've earned it." Kevin took the cup gratefully. "Thanks, I needed this." Daniel leaned against the car, sipping his coffee. "You've been doing good work lately," he said. "I can tell you're trying harder." Kevin shrugged modestly. "I'm just trying to do what you taught me, to treat people right no matter who they are." Daniel nodded approvingly. "That's the key. Cars break down for everyone, rich or poor. It doesn't matter where someone comes from. What matters is how we help them." Kevin thought about those words long after Daniel walked away. He remembered the times at Carter Motors when he had turned customers away because they didn't fit his idea of the right kind of client. Back then, he convinced himself that he was protecting the dealership's image. Now he realized how wrong he had been. Those customers weren't just numbers, they were people with families, jobs, and dreams, and he had dismissed them without a second thought. That afternoon, a man named Joe came into the shop. His car had broken down on the highway and he looked exhausted. Joe wore worn-out boots and carried a toolbox, suggesting he worked in construction. When Kevin greeted him, Joe hesitated, looking embarrassed. "I don't have much money," Joe admitted. "But I need my car fixed. My kids depend on me to get them to school." Kevin smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry about that right now. Let's take a look at your car first." He spent the next hour diagnosing the problem, a faulty alternator, and explained the repair process to Joe. When it came time to discuss the cost, Kevin offered a discounted rate. "We'll get you back on the road," he promised. Joe shook his hand, visibly relieved. "Thank you so much. You have no idea how much this means to me." As Kevin watched Joe drive away, he felt a warmth spread through his chest. For the first time in a long while, he felt proud of himself, not for making a sale or hitting a target, but for helping someone in need. Meanwhile, Michelle Carter continued her efforts to reshape Carter Motors. She traveled frequently, visiting dealerships across the country to check on progress and address concerns. Her presence inspired employees, many of whom admired her dedication to fairness and equality. But Michelle knew the work wasn't done. Even with the new training programs and stricter policies, she understood that true change required constant vigilance. One Saturday afternoon, Michelle visited a dealership in Chicago. It was located in a bustling neighborhood surrounded by cafes and small businesses. As she entered the showroom, she noticed something different. The atmosphere felt welcoming. Employees greeted customers warmly, regardless of their appearance or demeanor. There was a genuine effort to connect with people, to understand their needs rather than judge them. Michelle approached a young salesperson named Maria, who was assisting a family browsing SUVs. After the family left, Michelle introduced herself. "Hi, I'm Michelle," she said. "How's everything going?" Maria's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, Ms. Carter. Everything's great, thank you. The training really helped us see things differently. Michelle smiled. I'm glad to hear that. Can you give me an example of how it's made a difference? Maria nodded enthusiastically. Times New Roman. Maria thought for a moment before answering Michelle's question. Well, she began, there was this one customer last week. A man who came in wearing old clothes and driving a beat-up truck. At first, I could tell some of the other staff weren't sure if he was serious about buying anything. But I remembered what we learned in the training, so I went up to him and asked how I could help. Michelle listened intently, nodding encouragingly. He said he was saving up to buy a car for his daughter who just got her license. Maria continued. He didn't have much money, but he wanted something reliable. So I showed him our pre-owned options and helped him find a compact sedan that fit his budget. He was so grateful, it felt good knowing I made a difference. Michelle smiled warmly. That's exactly the kind of story I love hearing. Thank you for sharing that with me. As Michelle walked around the showroom, she noticed similar interactions happening everywhere. Employees greeted customers with genuine enthusiasm, asking questions to understand their needs instead of making assumptions. The atmosphere was lively yet respectful, a far cry from the cold indifference she'd witnessed at the dealership where Kevin had worked. It gave her hope that the changes she'd implemented were starting to take root. Later that evening, Michelle returned to her hotel room. She sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Her mind drifted back to Kevin and the way she had fired him on the spot. While it had been necessary, Michelle couldn't help but wonder what had become of him. Had he learned from his mistakes? Was he trying to rebuild his life? Kevin, meanwhile, was settling into his new routine at Daniel's repair shop. He no longer felt ashamed of working there. Instead, he found joy in the simple act of helping people. Each day brought new challenges, cars that refused to start, engines that rattled mysteriously. But solving those problems gave him a sense of accomplishment. More importantly, he realized that fixing cars wasn't just about mechanics. It was about trust. Customers relied on him to be honest and fair, and Kevin took that responsibility seriously. One Friday afternoon, as Kevin wiped grease off his hands, Daniel approached him with a thoughtful expression. "You've come a long way since you started here," Daniel said. "I'm proud of you." Kevin looked surprised. "Really? You think so?" "Absolutely," Daniel replied. "You used to judge people before they even opened their mouths. Now you listen to them, that's huge." Kevin nodded slowly, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "I guess I've learned a lot, not just about cars, but about people too." Daniel grinned. "Good. Keep it up." That evening, as Kevin drove home, he decided to write a letter. For weeks, he had been thinking about reaching out to Michelle Carter. He wanted to apologize for his behavior and thank her for exposing his flaws. Writing the letter wasn't easy. It forced him to confront his past actions and acknowledge the harm he had caused. But Kevin knew it was the right thing to do. The next morning, he dropped the letter in the mail, unsure if Michelle would ever read it or respond. Still, sending it gave him a sense of closure, like he was finally taking responsibility for his mistakes. A few days later, Michelle received Kevin's letter. She opened it curiously, scanning the neatly written words. "Dear Miss Carter, I want to start by saying I'm sorry. What I did to you and to the customers at your dealership was wrong. I let my biases cloud my judgment, and I hurt people because of it. Being fired was a wake-up call, and while it was hard to face the consequences, it pushed me to reflect on my actions. Since then, I've started working at a small repair shop. My boss has taught me a lot about treating people with respect and focusing on what truly matters. I know I can't undo the damage I caused, but I'm trying to become a better person. Thank you for showing me the truth, even if it was painful to hear." Sincerely, Kevin Michelle read the letter twice, her emotions shifting between anger, sadness, and a glimmer of hope. She appreciated Kevin's honesty and willingness to admit his faults. It wasn't an excuse for his behavior, but it was a step toward redemption. She decided to arrange a meeting with him. After all, everyone deserved a second chance if they were willing to work for it. The following week, Michelle met Kevin at a quiet cafe near downtown. When he arrived, he looked nervous, fidgeting with his jacket as he sat down across from her. Michelle greeted him calmly, offering a small smile. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I read your letter and I appreciate your apology." Kevin swallowed hard. "I meant every word of it," he replied. "I know I messed up, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting how I treated you and those customers. But I'm trying to change." Michelle studied him carefully. "Change isn't easy," she said. "It takes time and effort. Are you committed to improving yourself?" "Yes," Kevin answered without hesitation. "I've already started. Working at the repair shop has shown me how important it is to treat people fairly. I don't want to go back to being the person I was." Michelle nodded thoughtfully. "Good, because I believe in second chances, if they're earned. I'm not offering you your old job back, but I do think there's value in learning from your mistakes. If you're serious about growth, I'd like to keep in touch. Maybe someday you can use your experience to help others avoid making the same errors." Kevin blinked, surprised by her offer. "I'd like that," he said softly. "Thank you." They talked for nearly an hour, discussing lessons learned and the importance of accountability. By the end of the conversation, Michelle felt cautiously optimistic. Kevin wasn't perfect. He still had a long road ahead, but he seemed genuinely remorseful and eager to improve. Over the next few months, Kevin continued working at the repair shop, applying the values Daniel had instilled in him. He also stayed in touch with Michelle, occasionally emailing updates about his progress. In return, Michelle shared stories about the positive changes happening at Carter Motors. Their relationship became one of mutual respect, built on a foundation of honesty and growth. At the same time, Michelle remained focused on her mission to eliminate bias within the company. She launched a mentorship program, pairing experienced employees with newcomers to foster inclusivity and teamwork. She also introduced monthly check-ins at each dealership, ensuring that staff members felt supported and valued. One evening, as Michelle reviewed feedback from recent customer surveys, she noticed a recurring theme: gratitude. Many customers expressed appreciation for the warm welcome they received at Carter Motors, regardless of their background or financial status. It was proof that her efforts were paying off. Feeling a sense of accomplishment, Michelle closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Every challenge, every difficult conversation had brought her closer to creating the company she had always envisioned, one where everyone belonged. As she gazed out the window at the night sky, Michelle allowed herself a rare moment of peace. The road ahead would still have obstacles, but she was ready to face them. With determination and compassion, she believed Carter Motors could continue to grow into a beacon of fairness and respect for its employees, its customers, and the community it served. Months passed, and the changes at Carter Motors began to take deeper root. Michelle Carter's efforts to reshape the company's culture were paying off in ways she hadn't fully anticipated. Employees who had once felt overlooked or undervalued now spoke openly about their experiences, sharing both challenges and successes during team meetings. Customers noticed the shift too, leaving glowing reviews about how they were treated with kindness and respect. The transformation wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension and misunderstandings, but the overall atmosphere was one of progress and hope. One sunny afternoon, Michelle visited a dealership in Atlanta, one of the locations that had struggled the most with discrimination in the past. As she walked through the showroom, she observed employees interacting with customers. A young couple browsed SUVs while a salesperson patiently answered their questions. Nearby, a family with 3 children laughed as another employee helped them climb into a minivan for a test drive. Everyone seemed comfortable, relaxed, and genuinely happy to be there. Michelle approached Lisa, who was visiting the location to conduct follow-up training sessions. "How's it going?" Michelle asked with a smile. Lisa grinned back. "It's amazing. The staff here has really embraced the new values. They're not just following rules, they're living them." Michelle nodded approvingly. "That's what I wanted to hear." As they continued their walkthrough, Michelle noticed a bulletin board filled with handwritten notes from customers. Each note expressed gratitude for the exceptional service they had received. One stood out in particular. "Thank you for making me feel welcome. I've always been nervous about walking into car dealerships, but your team made the experience easy and enjoyable." Michelle read the words aloud, her voice tinged with emotion. "This is why we do what we do," she said, softly. "Every customer deserves to feel valued." Lisa placed a hand on Michelle's shoulder. "You've made this possible. You've given people a chance to see each other differently, to treat each other better." Michelle shook her head modestly. "It's not just me. It's everyone, working together. We're building something bigger than ourselves." Meanwhile, Kevin's life continued to evolve in unexpected ways. His work at Daniel's repair shop had taught him humility and patience, qualities he never realized he lacked before. He no longer judged customers based on appearances. Instead, he focused on understanding their needs and finding solutions. Over time, he became known in the community as someone reliable and trustworthy, a far cry from the arrogant manager he used to be. One day, as Kevin worked on a car, Daniel approached him with an unusual request. "There's a local high school looking for volunteers to teach students about auto mechanics," Daniel explained. "I thought you might be interested." Kevin raised an eyebrow. "Me? Teaching kids? Why not?" Daniel replied. "You've learned a lot since you started here. Sharing that knowledge could inspire someone else." After some hesitation, Kevin agreed. He spent the next few weeks preparing for his first class, gathering tools and materials to demonstrate basic repairs. On the day of the lesson, he arrived at the high school feeling nervous but excited. The classroom buzzed with energy as students filed in, their faces lighting up at the sight of car parts laid out on tables. Kevin introduced himself and began explaining how engines worked. To his surprise, the students were eager to learn, asking questions and taking notes. By the end of the session, several of them thanked him for making the subject interesting and accessible. As Kevin drove home that evening, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. For years, he had measured success by titles and wealth. Now he understood that true success came from making a positive impact on others' lives. Back at Carter Motors, Michelle decided to hold a company-wide event to celebrate the strides they had made toward equality and inclusivity. The gathering took place at a large convention center, decorated with banners bearing slogans like "Respect starts here" and "Together we thrive." Employees from all locations attended, along with customers who had shared inspiring stories about their experiences with the company. During her keynote speech, Michelle stood on stage addressing the crowd. "When I founded Carter Motors, I dreamed of creating a place where everyone felt welcome," she began. "But dreams aren't enough. They require action, effort, and sometimes tough decisions. Together, we've taken steps to ensure that our dealerships reflect the values we believe in." She paused, scanning the room. Faces looked back at her, some familiar, others new, but all united by a shared purpose. "We've faced challenges along the way," she continued, "but every challenge has brought us closer to becoming the company we want to be. And that's thanks to all of you." The audience erupted into applause, cheering loudly. Michelle smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She spotted Alex, Maria, Emily, and many others who had played key roles in driving change. Even Lisa stood nearby, wiping away tears. After the speech, attendees mingled, sharing stories and laughter. Michelle wandered through the crowd, stopping occasionally to chat with employees and customers alike. At one point, she found herself standing near a display featuring photos of various dealership events. One image caught her eye, a group of employees posing with a customer outside a dealership, smiles wide and arms linked. Beneath the photo was a caption, "Family isn't just blood, it's community." Michelle felt a lump rise in her throat. This was exactly what she had hoped to create, a sense of belonging that extended beyond transactions and profits. It was about connection, trust, and mutual respect. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Michelle stepped outside for some fresh air. The cool breeze brushed against her face as she gazed at the city skyline. Lights twinkled in the distance, reflecting off the glass windows of skyscrapers. She thought about how far Carter Motors and she herself had come over the years. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Pulling it out, she saw a text message from Kevin. "Thank you again for giving me a chance to grow. I'll never forget what you've taught me." Michelle smiled, typing a quick reply. "You've earned it. Keep going. You're doing great." Putting her phone away, she took a deep breath. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but she was ready for whatever came next. With determination and compassion, she believed Carter Motors could continue to lead by example, proving that businesses could thrive while staying true to their values. As Michelle climbed into her car and drove home, she reflected on the journey so far. Every challenge, every difficult decision had brought her closer to achieving her vision. And though there would always be room for improvement, she felt confident that the foundation was strong. Together, they had built something remarkable, not just a company but a community defined by fairness, respect, and humanity. For the first time in a long while, Michelle allowed herself to relax. The weight of responsibility still rested on her shoulders, but it felt lighter now, balanced by the knowledge that she wasn't alone. She had a team of dedicated individuals supporting her, striving alongside her to make the world a little better, one interaction at a time.